morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a look at the continued complete history of the Pokemon trading card game. And today, we have made our way to EX Dragon Frontiers. Now, this is the penultimate set in the Ruby and Sapphire block. It's taken a while. There are many sets in the Ruby and Sapphire block. I want to say 16. There are a lot. We're almost at the end, and I did just beat the Elite Four for the second time. I just need to catch Deoxys, and my run of Alpha Sapphire is complete. I'm playing the games alongside making these videos. It seemed like a more fun way to do it, so I will soon be starting my run on Platinum. Now, this set was released in Japan on the 29th of June 2006, and it made its way out in English on November the 8th, 2006. And according to the lovely folks at Bulbapedia, good website to use for research, this was actually, remember, we're in the Hoenn region here. We've got our own region, which we don't usually have for the TCG. And essentially, it's an island far away where Delta species thrive. Naturally. And one thing that's very cool here, we don't have any dual-type Delta species Pokemon. In previous sets, we've seen dual-type, lots of the metal for the whole Hoenn thing, the tower and all of that. But no, they are all single-type here, which is very, very cool. Now, it is also kind of interesting to note that there were only 4 non-Delta Pokemon in the entire set. And they were actually all reprints. We had reprints of Larvitar and Pupitar from Expedition, and reprints of Routes and Kirlia from Sandstorm. Outside of that, we are entirely Delta Pokemon here, which is very cool. Although it was the last set for Delta Pokemon. As I record this in August 2020, Delta Pokemon have not come back. But how cool would it be to have a Pokemon game set in the Hoenn region with Delta species Pokemon? Do not tell me that would not be an amazing game. I would play that in a heartbeat. Hey-ho. Now, the pre-release card here was just the Dragonair from the set. But what was really interesting here was the fact that there was a pre-release deck box. Or was there? Now, there was a lovely article written by Charlie Herlocker of Ludkin's Collectibles. I'll link it in the description. And there was a pre-release deck box, like we saw for the last couple sets, that was made and produced for Dragon Frontiers. Now, according to Charlie's article, essentially what happened was that there was a hold-up at customs. So the organised play department of the Pokemon Company got the prototypes, sent them out to high-ranking tournament organisers, etc., to check the quality of the boxes, but it was too late to actually produce them, so they never actually got produced. But some of the ones, obviously, that were made got sent out to be tested and assessed and all of that. And, of course, they just got kept. Now, we don't know exactly how many of these were made. The estimate in Charlie's article is definitely less than 100, but probably more than the 20 or 50 that most people think. So we don't really know is the honest answer. We have seen sales of these for $700, which is kind of a little bit ridiculous, but it's just extremely weird that these actually got made. Now, of course, I'm a huge fan of these because you've got Latias and Latios, and you know Latias is Baby Daisy Spirit Pokemon. So I honestly don't know exactly how rare these are, how many were produced, but it's a very cool little footnote in the history of the Pokemon trading card game. And one more shout out to Charlie Herlocker and his awesome article. Check it out. I will pop a link to it in the description. So, that was strange. Now, in terms of the most expensive cards, there was a Charizard Star in this set. So clearly it's Charizard Star. I don't have a perfect estimate here, but to put it bluntly, if you can pick these up, if you can pick one of these up in mint condition for $1,000, you're doing all right. You should expect to pay more than $1,000 for one of these. Outside of that, there is Mewstar. Mewstar should be setting you back somewhere in the region of $300 or a little bit more. And not including stars, we do have Gardevoir EX that comes in around about $120-ish. Gardevoir, of course, being a very popular Pokemon, but as we're going to see, Gardevoir EX was also a fairly playable card, so that kind of explains that. Now, looking at the EXs, one thing that was very cool here, this is, of course, called EX Dragon Frontiers, and of the 10 EXs in the set, only 2 of them were not Dragon Pokemon. So we got ourselves an Altaria, a Dragonite, a Flygon. That was a very good card, we'll get back to that. It was also the first kind of EX, etc. that I ever actually pulled. When I got properly back into the game around about the Diamond and Pearl era, I picked up a couple packs of Dragon Frontiers, and I pulled myself this card, and I was delighted. There was Gardevoir, one of the 2 non-part dragon types, Kingdra, Latias and Latios, of course they came as a pair, Rayquaza, another phenomenal card, we'll get there in a moment, Salamence, and Tyranitar, who was the other one that was not part dragon type. And as previously mentioned, there were 2 Pokemon stars in the set. Those were Charizard and Mew. And you'll notice these are all Delta species, but of course they are. I told you there was only 4 non-Delta Pokemon in the set, and I've already told you which ones those were. Now, having a little bit of a look at the theme decks here, we were back to having 2 theme decks as you would usually expect. We had Power Wave theme deck. This had Feraligatr on the front. This was a Lightning Fighting type deck. And you got yourselves a Holo Feraligatr, and non-Holo Mantine, non-Holo Cloyster, and a non-Holo Seadra. A couple of them, in fact. So we actually saw that there were more rares, and we usually were expecting a holo and 2 rares. Here we actually had a holo and 4 rares, 3 different types. That was unusual at the time. And that was carried on in Shadow Blaze. This was a Typhlosion-focused theme deck. It was Fire Psychic type. And you got yourself a holo Typhlosion, a rare Lickitung, and 2 rare Vibrava. Oh, and a rare Arbok. Don't want to leave out Arbok now, do we? So that was kind of cool. Now, moving over into the best cards, we're really not talking about trainer cards here. There were plenty of good trainer cards in the set. There was Strength Charm and Buffer Piece. Did more damage or made you took less damage, respectively. They saw a bunch of play. Holon Mentor, very good card. Copycat, very good card. But all of these were ones we'd seen before. Honestly, in terms of non-reprint trainer cards, we're basically looking at Island Hermit. That was about the only original card in the set, in terms of trainer cards, that was actually any good and saw any play, and it didn't see a huge amount of play. What it did was it let you turn 2 of your prize cards face up, and then draw 2 cards. So it could draw you some cards while essentially telling you what was coming up in the not too distant future, i.e. what you would draw as prizes. So not a great set for trainers, but a very, very good set when we're looking at Pokemon. And we have to start off with a couple of dragons. Like, for instance, Flygon. I told you I love this Flygon. I told you I have one of these Flygon. This is a very, very cool card. Now, Flygon had the ability Sand Damage. As long as it was active, you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon between turns. And then for free energy, you did 80 damage, and then 10 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that had any damage counters on it. And this was a very, very good card. We'll get to the deck more later, but this was at the centre of the Flyvies deck, which won the Junior World Championships in 2007. Being a Delta Flygon, it obviously comboed very nicely with the other Delta Flygon. This was the one that let you attach an extra energy during your turn to a Delta Pokemon. Clearly very, very good when you're rocking along with a Flygon Delta deck. Also, shout out for the amount of Delta Flygon that we got. That was kind of cool. So we love Flygon, and Flygon really was a phenomenal card, and it made its way into a lot of different decks. It was one of the best attackers around. The other full-on, over-the-top, phenomenal card from the set was Rayquaza EX. Now, Rayquaza had the Pokebody Rage Aura. This is also one of my favourite cards that I always go after in a cube. Love cubing this Rayquaza. If you've got more prize cards remaining than your opponent, i.e. you're behind in the game, you ignore all the colourless energy necessary to use its attacks. So Special Circuit did 30 to one of your opponent's Pokemon, but if they have any Poké Powers or Poké Bodies, it does 50 instead. And if you're behind on prizes, that's for a single energy. Sniping 50 for one energy at the time was absolutely nuts. And then 4 energy, 70 damage, but if you're behind on prizes, 2 energy, 70 damage. That is a really quite awesome card, and it made its way into so many different decks. It was a very big part, one could argue the main attacker, in the Absol Eevees deck that actually won the Masters Division in 2007. That was an Absol Eevees deck like we talked about a few videos ago, but make no mistake about it, Rayquaza EX was a big part of the deck. Now, I told you that Gardevoir was a very good card in this set, and I meant it. It had the Poké Power Imprison that said that if Gardevoir was your active, you were allowed to put an Imprison marker on one of your opponent's Pokemon. What's an Imprison marker? It's just a random counter. But what it does is any Pokemon with an Imprison marker on it cannot use any Poké Powers or Poké Bodies. So what you would do, even if you weren't using it to do 80 damage and moving a fire energy to one of your bench Pokemon, you would try and get Gardevoir in and out the active to go ahead and drop Imprison markers on your opponent's Pokemon, like, I don't know, that Pidgeot card we keep talking about, and that would essentially stop your opponent being able to use Pidgeot's ability or any other ability on any other Pokemon your opponent wanted to use. And shall we say this got pretty gosh darn bad for your opponent pretty gosh darned quickly. It was a very good card. We did sometimes see it as its own deck, more on that later, but it did also just pop up in random decks just as an anti-Poké Power / Poké Body Pokemon. It really was very, very good indeed. Now, the other card in this set that really did make its way into a whole bunch of decks was Mew Star. I know, it wasn't worth anywhere near as much as Charizard, and Charizard was not a good card. Mew, for 1 water energy, let you choose a basic energy attached to Mew and do 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon that is the same type as that basic energy card. And that was a really cool attack, but it was very situational. If you were playing lots of different basic energy, clearly this was awesome. If you weren't, it was very situational. But it also had the attack Mimicry, which Mew tends to do. Mew is a bit of a copycat. And it let you choose an attack on one of your opponent's Pokemon in play, did not have to be their active, and you got to copy that attack. Now, you needed the right energy, and you needed to do anything else required to do the attack, but in a mirror match, for instance, it would give you an extra attacker, bearing in mind that stars only give up 1 prize, and EXs give up 2. So it basically let you in a mirror match have an extra copy of your EX attacker without having to give up an extra prize. But it also, and again, situational, because you didn't always have the requisite energy, but it would allow you to consistently copy your opponent's best Pokemon's best attacks. That made its way into a huge amount of decks. Now, Latios was also a very cool tech. Latias saw like no play, which made me really sad. But Latios was very good. The Pokebody gave free retreat to each of your Latias, Latias EX, Latios, and Latios EX, which was nice. But really this was played for Ice Barrier. 2 energy, 30 damage, and it prevented all effects of attacks, including damage, done to Latios EX by your opponent's EXs during your opponent's next turn. So basically it just made you immune to EXs next turn. That was kind of ridiculous. You can see why it saw a bunch of play. Against an EX-heavy deck, it got kind of silly good. Now, Nidoqueen Delta was also a very cool card, made its way into a bunch of decks, but it had the Poké Power Invitation. Once during your turn, it allowed you to search your deck for a basic Pokemon or an evolution, and just put it into your hand. It just let you search out 1 Pokemon per turn. That was kind of ridiculous for your consistency. But it also had an attack for free colourless energy, making it very easy to put into any deck, that did 30 damage, plus 10 more for each basic Pokemon and each evolution card in your discard pile, though it did max out at 90 damage. But still, I'm showing you a bunch of Pokemon here. You know that 90 damage for free energy is pretty gosh darn good. And it had the searching ability as well. Now, this did make its own deck, but one of the really cool things here was that this was actually used by a bunch of people to update that Nidoqueen from Fire Red and Leaf Green deck that did go ahead and win the World Championships in 2004. It's been a little while since Nidoqueen was actually relevant, but there was a time when Nidoqueen was actually really, really good. We had a couple really good Nidoqueen in a row, which is kind of lovely. Now, moving on then, we also saw a very, very nice Lickitung. And this Lickitung actually made its way into a whole bunch of decks. Now, this Lickitung, for 1 colorless energy, let you draw 2 cards. Nice bonus in the early game to get yourself rolling. But for 1 psychic energy, you put 1 damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon, or 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Delta Pokemon. Obviously, a really nice combo here with Absol, that firstly let you move damage counters when you played it, but also did extra damage to any damage bench Pokemon. And it worked really well with Shiftry EX, who we had a look at last week in Crystal Guardians, that again did 30 damage, but 50 to a Pokemon if they had any damage counters on already. This was a nice early game Pokemon to pop those damage counters on, or draw some cards. Either worked rather nicely indeed. Now, Electabuzz was a weirdly good Pokemon from this set. It had the Pokepower, Power of Evolution. And it basically said that once during your turn, if Electabuzz is an evolved Pokemon, i.e. if you'd evolved it from Elekid, you could draw a card from the bottom of your deck. Nowadays, a stage 1 drawing a card, we've had a couple lately, they ain't too good. Back then, bunch of people used it. Also, shout out for Electabuzz having a mountain in the background of its artwork that looked basically exactly the same as the set symbol. Not the only Pokemon that did. Check out Dragonair, for instance. It's almost like a little bit of a theme. It's almost like this island I told you about is the set symbol. How weird. It's also very interesting to note that when Diamond and Pearl came around, Electivire became a really, really good deck. And this was the Electabuzz of choice that you would generally evolve into, so that you could get that extra drawing before you evolved. Now, the last Pokemon I want to shout out was not a particularly great Pokemon, but Meganium was very, very cool. It had the Pokepower Evolutionary Call, which just said that when you played Meganium from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you got to search your deck for up to 3 in any combination of Basic or Evolution Pokemon. It was kind of nice for consistency in a few decks, like some Meganium decks that were running around. Now, in terms of top decks, it was a little bit weird, because a lot of the top decks here were really taking existing archetypes, whacking these new Pokemon in, and then going, yeah mate, this is way better now. So as I mentioned previously, the Junior World Champion in 2007, it was Yun Hasebi, sorry for the pronunciation, who won with a really Flygon EX Delta focused deck, using the Pokepower and the attack, and it really was a Flygon deck. Now, it did use the other Flygon Delta to accelerate energy, which was fairly important. And then it did actually play a little bit of an EV suite as well. There was an Absol. Now, it wasn't a full Absol EV deck, but it did play Absol, and it did play Vaporeon. That's the one that when you evolve it, you can have your opponent shuffle a hand into their deck and draw 4 cards, especially when they're taking damage on all their basics until they evolve them. That could be hilarious. And one of the Jolteon that lets you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon when you evolve up. Because again, we're trying to pile damage onto the bench here. That was a pretty nice way to go about doing so. It was kind of important. Now, another deck that kind of came around here was Legendary Ascent. Now, this was a deck with which Tom Roos won the Masters Division World Championships again in 2007. And this was kind of a weird one, because it was an Absol EV's deck. The most popular card in the deck, the one he played most of, was still the Absol, which probably was your main attacker over Rayquaza. But then there were a couple copies of Rayquaza. And then there were a couple copies of Mew. That's the one that could copy any attack, so you could use it to essentially play around with any of your Pokemon. Though do remember that it didn't have Rayquaza's Pokebody, so it wouldn't have the reduced attack cost if you were behind on prizes. Then we saw the Jolteon and Vaporeon that we generally tend to see in all of these decks, fairly important. And then that Jolteon start that we're going to get to properly next week, but when you played it from your hand to your bench, you put 1 damage counter on each active Pokemon, yours and your opponent's. And then we saw the Espeon as well. That's the one that when you evolved into it, you got to devolve one of your opponent's Pokemon. The theory being that you put enough damage on an evolved Pokemon to KO the previous evolution, and then you'd evolve them with Espeon, so you can't KO to stage 2, but you put it down to a stage 1, and then the stage 1 does get KO'd, and that's kind of hilarious. Incidentally, this was another one of those decks that did play a copy of the Lickitung Delta, because why would it not? Now, a very cool deck that I went and got from the blog of the lovely Jason Klaczynski, excellent blog, do please check it out, it's really, really good, is Gardevoir. And the cool thing here is that it's a very Gardevoir deck. Like a proper Gardevoir deck. Now, it did play this new Gardevoir with the imprison counters and turning off abilities and all of that. But it also played a bunch of other Gardevoir. There were a couple of the Gardevoir that came around in Delta Species. That's the one with the energy jump ability. The one that lets you move an energy from one of your Pokemon to another. And also does for free energy 10 damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Or for 2 energy, lets you do 10 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on Gardevoir. Psychic Rage nominally being probably the main attack here. We did also see the Gardevoir from Power Keepers. Now we'll get to this Gardevoir properly next week, but it basically let you once during your turn search your deck for a Psychic Energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon, putting 2 damage counters on them. Oh look! That feels like it's going to allow you to firstly get all the energy on you need for Psychic Rage in one go, 1 ability, 1 from your hand, and then it's going to put damage on, meaning Psychic Rage will do more. Bearing in mind that Gardevoir is dual Psychic and Metal type, so you would be able to hit 2 different weaknesses here. Wow, look at that. It did also have the attack Energy Burst, 10 damage for each energy attached to Gardevoir and the defending Pokemon, which could end up being a very powerful attack under the right circumstances. How cool. And then Nidoqueen did come around as a bit of a Nidoqueen Delta deck. We're not talking about the update of the existing one here. We're not talking about the taking the Worlds deck, the one that won Worlds, and buffing it up a bit. We're talking about an actual new deck, shall we say. And it was built around Nidoqueen Delta, let's be clear. Now, Nidoqueen, of course, as we mentioned a moment ago, it's got the Poke Power that lets you search for a Pokemon, and the attack that hopefully does 90 damage for free energy, as long as you've got 6 Pokemon in the discard pile, which you would hope a lot of the time you actually would. Now, it really was a Nidoqueen Delta deck. You would play one of the other Nidoqueen in there as well, because why would you not? You would play the Pidgeot Delta to come along and turn off your opponent's abilities, which was fun, and then you would go full Holon engine with your Holon's Magneton and all of that good stuff. Very fun deck indeed. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was Dragon Frontiers. Brought us some of the best tech Pokemon we've seen in the game, as well as pretty much giving us the world's winning decks in Masters and Juniors at least the year it was released. Well, it was released in November, so the first Worlds after it was released. Point is, very good set, very good Pokemon. But now I want to hear from you guys. Tell me your memories of the set. Tell me what you think about it. Tell me about any other decks or cards or anything, to be honest, that you want to chat about. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.